Well, let's get going, shall we? So welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to this Q&A with the team behind the Uncertain Kingdom project, Swan. I am joined by Siân Docksey, Sophie King, Stephanie Aspin and Helen Simmons to talk about Swan, which we're going to assume everyone has seen, so there could be spoilers in here. If you haven't seen it, tough luck. I hope you watch it afterwards. But Swan is the story of a couple dealing with the husband's decision to take part in a very advanced citizenship test. He's succeeded, and the upshot of it is that he's going to be turned into a swan, and they are figuring out how to adapt their lives accordingly. Needless to say, it's very funny, and probably we do need to say it's essentially a Brexit allegory, because that may not be immediately obvious. So let's kick off with you guys introducing yourselves. Siân, since you're in my top left, I don't know where else you are for everyone else, but you're my top left. So let's start with you and how you became involved in the project and what you did on it.
Cool. Hi, I'm Siân. I co-wrote the script with Sophie King. This project dates back to 2014 when Sophie and I were working for a digital branding company together and coming up with comedy short ideas. We came up with this kind of completely independently of any Brexit happenings. We're not so prophetic that we saw kind of Brexit coming along around the corner. And then we kind of, went separate ways, kind of went off and did different things. And then when I found out about the Uncertain Kingdom, I kind of remembered this, and it sort of felt like the story had suddenly become relevant. So I got in touch with Sophie to ask if she'd be interested in revisiting it. We then got in touch with Helen, who's a friend from uni and who runs Service with Steph, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. And then the team came together, and then we made a film, and now we're having this Zoom chat.
Look at that. Nice and easy. Sophie, what about you, your side of that experience?
Oh, it was just really fun. I mean, it's kind of, I guess I kind of wanted to, in case there's other writers, watching this, it was really cool to sort of see something get a kind of second chance to come to life, because I think when we were originally devising it, it was a very self-contained comedy project, it's sort of suddenly having political relevance isn't something that anyone anticipated when we were thinking about it the first time. It's great. I mean, I'm sure, any creative people out there have got hundreds of projects just rotting in the Google Docs, and you're sort of wondering what to do with them. So it was just brilliant having such an amazing team come together and make it happen. So
we shared it with our bosses at the time, who kind of didn't really know what to do with it. So they were why is he turning into a swan? We were I don't know. And that was kind of it. So it definitely took on new relevance when the Uncertain Kingdom scheme was announced, and we were thinking how we could fit ideas to the brief. I think that actually in itself gave it that extra level and kind of gave it a reason to exist, I suppose. Because I think that's in terms of me and Siân's pairing. Siân is very much from a kind of surrealist comedy world where things don't need explanations, I always say, and then my background is in more kind of drama, so it was bringing those two worlds together to try and give it a bit of an emotional heart as well as the comedy, hopefully.
And Helen and Steph, obviously you're the producers. How did it come to you, and what was your response when you read it?
I feel like Siân sent it to me on Facebook or something.
Yeah.
I got it on Facebook as well.
Yeah.
That wonderful medium. And no, I just read it and just laughed and thought it was really funny. And we made quite a lot of shorts and weren't really desperate to keep making shorts, but this was just so good.
Yeah, I hear you. That happened to me right before we made the Uncertain Kingdom.
Yeah.
And then I did 20.
And then we both loved it, and could sort of see exactly what it was going to be and how that it would feel relevant, but not in a sort of hammering it over the head way, just in a really fun, entertaining way.
Yeah, I think it felt like something that was really interesting about it was, and I hope it came across, that it was sort of like going on that journey with Ian and Donna, and although it's very comic, it's hopefully not like poking like direct fun at them. And I think that was something that like came out in the development process a lot, was like giving Donna that space, which I think we all thought was a great move, because actually, and especially when Sally brought her to life, like almost until that point I hadn't quite realized Donna's comic potential, I don't think. And actually that was such a fun process, even that movement from the script to the screen.
Yeah, because she's really your way into the story, isn't she? Because this absurd thing is happening and you actually need this very normal person, very relatable person in the middle of it to be like, come with me on this, like this is happening, I think it's crazy too.
It's like side eyes to the camera.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Sophie and Shan, was that always the plan, that it was going to be this mockumentary, it was going to have this kind of improvisational feel to it?
I think one of the early references was Human Remains, which was, I don't think it's kind of overtly mockumentary, like it is and it isn't. It's definitely something to think about when we were doing it, was how much we wanted to have that kind of conscious presence of the filmmakers. And I think where I got to in the end was actually something similar to The Office in a weird way. Different tonally in many ways, but also this kind of idea that people are always being watched, but they're not necessarily like explaining what they're doing all the time, because it felt like that would slow it down too much, probably.
I think with mockumentary as well, you can really kind of be absurd without it ever feeling like in your face. Completely coincidentally, I watched This Is Spinal Tap last night, and it's really striking how you can do things in a mockumentary which feel like, if you were doing a different kind of narrative script form, would feel quite forced, but you can have just little asides and things in a mockumentary, which, yeah, if you're kind of marrying something like very mundane as a setting with bits of surrealism, it just felt like it suited it. And also, to be completely honest, as a kind of practical thing, I think in 2014 when we were first developing it, we were thinking, okay, what if we shot this for like £90 just in someone's house over a weekend? And it's a very manageable kind of filmmaking style if you really had to do something on a shoestring budget.
Yeah you've definitely you found that balance between making it feel unrealistically high production value for what it would ever be made, whatever would make that film happen, you know, for what TV crew, what channel, whatever that would actually be. And it's quite a tough balance to find, I think. Tell us about this. Oh, sorry, Sophie, go ahead.
I was going to say, from a kind of shooting perspective, like, so Ronnie, the DP, also comes from a kind of drama background, and we found it really weird because everything, like, the coverage was completely different to what you'd normally get, because we were thinking, well, the camera crew of the documentary wouldn't be able to go in and get a close-up of a particular moment. So we were quite strict with ourselves that we wouldn't do that. And I think it drove our poor continuity woman insane, because she would say, don't you want to go in and get a detail of that movement in that way? And I was like, no, because we're not used to it.
It's not an 8-camera shot shoot.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a really weird way of getting stuff, and I think it was quite intense for the actors at some point in some of the scenes where we were filming just continuously in one shot. I mean, we did end up chopping into the edit a bit because we didn't want it to be kind of endlessly long. But it was definitely a really different way of working. I think that even schedule-wise, it was quite weird for all of us to kind of just do something and then be like, well, that scene's done.
Yeah. I mean, it did seem exceptionally chill when I visited set. Like, I mean, it was very, very relaxed.
So, like, the nicest shoots I've ever experienced.
It was so, we just sat and had a cup of tea. It was very nice. But I was gonna ask you about that coverage, Sophie, because, you know, it does feel very improvisational. You've got these little kind of smash zooms into stuff when something interesting is happening, coming out again, swinging the camera around. Is all of that just Ronnie actually, I mean, I'm assuming he was operating, just responding to what the cast were actually doing, or were you really planning that and it's like, we've rehearsed, we know he's going to do something funny with his hand, we're going to do a zoom in there?
I mean, to be honest, no. I mean, we didn't even know where we were shooting until like 2 days beforehand. So it was kind of just like, well, we'll go in there and we'll see what happens. I mean, we had a chat kind of before we did each scene of like, okay, here's like some of the key beats that we have to cover. Like in the dinner scene, we have to be on Ian when this realization is made or whatever else. So there was a couple of kind of key points, but beyond that, it was kind of like, well, just feel it, because the point is almost that the documentary team wouldn't know what's going to happen. So if you're a moment late to crash in on something, that's actually better. You shouldn't preempt it, because that wouldn't be natural. So yeah, it was improvised, but with like, we did rehearse things a very small amount, I guess, maybe like once. But I tend to not like much rehearsal anyway. So yeah, we didn't do too much of that.
Okay. And Steph and Helen talked about this cast. I mean, couldn't have been any better. How did that come together?
No, I think we got Mark Addy first, didn't we? And he came on quite early. You know, he took that leap of faith, I suppose, that, you know, I mean, he got to chat to Sophie, and I think, and he really responded to the script. I mean, I remember his email being like, "It's okay, Sophie, like, I get what we're going for. We just get it." And he did. I mean, it comes across on screen. And then we had wonderful Mark Sullivan, who, you know, the role of Ted could have been played in so many different ways. And actually, I mean, I think so many people find there's a bit where he's eating his sandwiches, you know, like one of the funniest parts of the film, you know, like for some people,
endearing.
Me and Helen recently, that they thought Mark O'Sullivan almost stole the show for them. You know, it's great because they have different cast members that they warm to immediately, and then obviously Sally and Kirsty had such a good relationship. We were very, very lucky, but you know, Mark Addy helped us pull it together. Really, he came on so quickly.
Yeah. We had a great casting director, Claudia Blunt, who sort of sent us ideas at the beginning, and yeah, Mark was such a brilliant shout. And I think it like Steph says, when you get that first person on, then you can sort of like build it around, and he kind of like made that feel really clear for us, and the tone of it. And everyone was just, I mean, again, like on shoots, it's really rare that your entire cast are lovely and that you can, you know, just get on with them and chat to them, and there's no like airs and graces, and everything's just fine. And we were so lucky with that as well, because that really makes a difference to the mood on set.
Not to lie, it got quite close to the bone, I think, with casting Sally. You know, just like, you know, because that does happen. I don't want to lie about the filmmaking process. You know, it's like the last week before the shoot, and we didn't have her part. We didn't have a Donna, and she was a firm favourite for everybody. And thank God, I think I remember there was like a huge issue with childcare and whether or not she was going to be able to do it. And we were saying, "We'll babysit your children on set. We've got DBS people, like please." And eventually it all worked out. It's one of those.
She was so grateful for that. She said it was like one of the first times that anyone had even like offered to help her with things like childcare. She was like, no one ever thinks of that. No one ever says that. It's like, well, we're a team of entirely women, and I think
yeah. And also, I think it's sufficiently desperate in that scenario. I think that helps too. What were your other challenges? I remember finding the house felt a bit hairy at one point.
One of the wonderful ones was Sophie and Sean wrote in this brilliant pulley system up the stairs. Our poor production designer, you know, it's the idea that once Ian's a swan, he won't be able to climb the stairs. So building a pulley system, and poor girl, I mean, she had to erect the thing like on the day with, you know, like Sophie said, we didn't know what the house was going to look like till quite last minute, and she was suddenly thrown in the deep end. But I think it almost worked better for looking a little slapdash.
Well, it looks completely daft.
Yeah.
And it led to one of my favourite lines in the film of you more sort of feed it. I mean, I don't know why, but I just couldn't cope with that. That just absolutely killed me. Which leads me on to actually ask you about improvisation on set. Like, how specific were you about those lines? Because I mean, you know, I don't even know how many drafts. I know how much thought went into those lines. When you get there, do you just go, okay, play with it?
I think we gave the actors the option fairly early on of, I mean, I would always say on any project, if you feel like the line is uncomfortable, then let's change it. Like, don't struggle to say something that feels weird to say, and we'd not had the chance to do a table read or anything like that, so it very much was kind of like seeing it happen right in front of us. But I think it's just about establishing that kind of safe space of, if you want to do things then you can, but you don't have to, because I think there's a lot of pressure, particularly on comedy actors, to be like, okay, here's the script, but forget that, be really funny, go. And that's also like not really helpful. So we generally did stick to the script, but then I think particularly as the actors kind of became more comfortable, they were playing around with it more, and it's often just stuff that you don't really notice, like that line that you just mentioned. There were loads of moments from both of the Marks in particular where you just see them do things in the rushes that you hadn't even like noticed on set, that are just so funny, those details. So yeah, it was definitely encouraged, but I would say we still had the kind of framework of the script, and then we made sure that we had some dedicated time specifically for more like improv moments as well, because one thing I found on shorts in particular is that you're cutting between so many scenes normally that it can feel a bit like the transitions can feel a bit jarring. So one thing I learned on the short before this one was to always make sure that you have a lot of cutaways, so just schedule like an hour at the end of the day or whatever just to get different bits. So those we did improv, and it was just, I mean, a lot of them didn't make it into the film, but just things like Mark's character like sat watching like Swan mating videos and then realizing that the camera crew are there and shutting the door, like little moments like that that you at least have then as a transition if you need to. So those were definitely much more improv as well.
Were there any gags or moments that either in the script or actually that came out of the improv that didn't make the cut, that was just painful to let go of?
I think there were definitely a couple of bits that were funnier on the page, particularly some of the like more surreal bits that are like there's bits where they were doing lots of like quiz questions, and like even like trying different, like trying Marmite, trying Vegemite, trying to tell which is British, and like things like that were quite jokey and seemed really funny and deadpan. When we did them, they felt almost too far removed, and we found that the funniest stuff was actually like right close to reality rather than going over here. It was when you were almost like, is this real, is this not real, kind of thing. That was actually where we found the funniest space. But I think that one thing that helped there in particular was Jason, our editor, was amazing at just kind of saying, oh no, that bit's not funny, and just like cutting out the whole scene. And you'd say, well, what about the scene in the bathroom? And you'd say, oh no, it's not funny. So yeah, so that, I think that worked well as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think also just an extra thing about, like, you know, Sophie mentions kind of working a lot within drama. A thing that's really clear from the final cut is it's telling a story, and it's really tempting to just kind of I guess kind of get quite indulgent with the world building, particularly when, you know, you've got sort of theoretically the whole house available to set little gags in and little things. But yeah, I think something that was really lovely about watching it all come together is there is a clear kind of like character arc and development, and also kind of with the sort of Brexit themes coming in, it was really important, and like, you know, Mark Addy was brilliant on this, of not making the characters like one-dimensional, or like kind of allowing for a lot of grey area of this person's not just a, like, he's not just a delusional egomaniac, like there's kind of real warmth and like interaction in there. So yeah, kind of like the sort of slightly more sketchy bits falling to the wayside for the sake of the storytelling being very clear. Yeah, I think kind of
really
no,
I think that was really, really important, is that it's not just kind of pointing and laughing at people, because that was what, at least for me, a lot of the political stuff that's happened over the last few years makes you really think, oh wow, I thought those things could never happen. I thought it was so obvious that people feel a certain way, and then it's made very clear that a huge amount of people don't feel the same way as you and feel passionately and are kind of enacting upon that passion. And so I think what we wanted to do with this film was kind of make people think about why people might make certain decisions, or even if someone's making a decision you don't agree with, how can you empathize with them in some way. You know, I think that was definitely something. Every time we were going through it, it was not like, oh, isn't this person silly? I also didn't want to make it, oh, aren't all husbands silly and useless? You know, I think there's elements of that as well, not making it too kind of black and white in a gender sense as well, because yeah, again, I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, this is you know, something I said to you guys on the phone when we chatted earlier, like what excited me about it at commissioning stage was that it was this kind of Brexit allegory, and it was very funny and it was very silly, but it also was a portrait of a marriage, and that's actually the most important part of the allegory for me, is the question of like, when half your relationship, half your country, half your planet goes in a direction you don't understand, how do you continue? Like, how do you make it work? How do you try and find that understanding? And I think that comes through really, really well. And again, as you say, like really came through in the development process, and that's what it became less about the gags and more about their relationship. And again, even more so in the edit. I was going to ask you about the kind of Brexit stage, because obviously this is, as you say, it was in your Google Docs for however long. At what point were you like, whoa, this is Brexit, and how did that conversation happen?
Shan, do you remember?
I think that I can't remember truthfully when, like years and years ago when we first wrote it, whether there was any I mean, the choice of a swan is not accidental, because it's so tied in with a real cliche of Britishness, and it was an advanced British citizenship test from the beginning. And I think, you know, the kind of themes of quite petty nationalism were there from the beginning, as I mean, you know, kind of this isn't the characterization that came through at the very end, but highly nationalist bigots have always been there. It's just they really came into prominence in the lead up to Brexit. It's unclear. I was actually like on a different trajectory. We were just talking, like, I think weirdly a breakthrough that I felt we kind of got to with redrafting was when we started really telling Donna's story through the script, because I think, like, I guess particularly with a filmmaking team of kind of Remainer London type people, you don't want to be very patronising towards kind of like Brexit voters as a whole. That's boring. And kind of what was interesting was the kind of people who might not be quite clear what's going on, but there's like forceful personalities around them, and you just kind of end up sort of getting tumbled into it without maybe realising. So yeah, I don't know, like we sort of picked this up in 2019 after everything from 2014 to 2016 had happened. I think the Swan element of nationalism was probably kind of in there from the beginning, but yeah, not as overtly.
Yeah, I don't really remember. But what the other thing I would say about that development process is, I think having it in the drawer for that period of time and then coming back to it, like we've all changed over that period of time as well. Like when I was writing it before, I was in a very different position. Like Shan and I were both in different places in our lives, and then coming back to it now, like I am now married, and like I have gone through different things, and so I think that I wouldn't have, even if we'd had all of this stuff had happened back when we'd originally done it, I don't think we would have ended up with a script that had the same kind of, hopefully, layers to it, because we weren't operating on that level. So I suppose that's an interesting thought. Now I do try and, like, even if I like work on something and nothing goes, like it doesn't go anywhere, it's like not totally writing it off, and more kind of just thinking, well, you're going to put this to one side for now, rather than like pushing something or saying, well, no, that's never happening. It's more just kind of, okay, well, maybe that idea is not for now or for who I am at this moment, but maybe me in 5 years' time will be able to engage with that in a much better way, or you can reflect on things in a different way.
Yeah, it's a really nice thought for creatives, that actually you can just put something to the side and just wait for its time and be patient, and it's not a sign that it's not going to happen. It just means it's not its moment.
And I found that with a lot of these kind of schemes as well, it's like it's also quite helpful to have stuff in a drawer, because often when these things are announced, it's like this crazy pressure of like, oh my god, I need to come up with an idea that's great, but also like so great that it'll be like that they'll give me the money, and you know, it can be quite a big creative pressure. So I definitely now think, okay, well, let's work on stuff, and then when there's submissions, then we'll submit for things, rather than suddenly when something's announced trying to think of something to fit it.
Yeah. And it demonstrates that you can have ideas that actually will fit different briefs. you know, that your ideas can be flexed in that way? Because obviously when you applied, we had no idea that it had existed for 5 odd years, whatever it was. To us, it just felt really, really pressing.
I feel like it could be so much better for it. Like Sophie's saying, like she's married now, and if that relationship hadn't felt so real, the Swan part would have been so absurd that we may have lost the audience. Whereas actually, because it does feel like it's about marriage, you sort of go along with it. You know, like the Swan part feels almost believable. Like it's not so absurd, but you almost forget that's what it's about, as he's like pecking around with his beak. Like, actually about Connor and Ian, and actually if Sophie and Siân hadn't had that perspective of a few years, actually it might have been half as good.
You might not have ended up with that line, "I'll clean that up later." Such a great tantrum line of just being trapped, like, oh shit, it's still my house, I know it's going to be me, like, let's not pretend it's not. Or as we're coming to the end, but just as a final thing, I wanted to ask you guys, having made that film, it's, you know, I guess coming on a year since you shot it, what have you taken away from it? You know, you guys producers didn't want to make any more shorts. Is that still the case? And are there any other kind of lessons or experiences that you're taking forward into your work now?
We have stood firm on further shorts at the moment. I think do you know what, the mood on that set and the way that it ran, I mean, to give Sophie her credit, she was one of the best directors that we've ever worked with, in the sense of how efficient she was, and like, but still got everything, and there was just no drama, no hassle. I think that is definitely something we now want to aspire to on every set, just to have that feeling, and to, you know, have a crew that is so positive and brilliant and gets the job done with a smile. That's so nice. I think on a very practical note, we will think about getting the rights to things on YouTube before we film them. That was a fun journey at the end of the edit. What else, Steph?
God, I know, I've completely forgotten that. I think my mind managed to blank that blind. We used a YouTube clip of some swans that belonged to someone else in Germany, and it took us a long time to poor Georgia was being like, you have to get the rights.
Sorry, you're not the only team to have had those "you must have the rights" emails, because it's no joke. What about you guys, Sophie, Siân?
I think for me, the mood on set thing is really important, and I'd also credit a lot of that to Oliver Brown, our AD, who's just like one of the best people I've ever met. He's done a few of my films now, and he's just like so wonderful, and I cannot praise him enough. And I think that definitely hiring the right people in those positions is just like so important. Like at one point we sort of moved the shoot dates partially so that he could do it, and I'm just really glad that we did that, because I don't think I would have felt relaxed in the same way and been able to experiment with things in the same way if he hadn't been there. So I'd mention that. But also, I suppose the bigger thing is I don't normally like make comedy and like didn't really have a huge, I wasn't particularly interested in making comedy films, and then Siân sent it and I was like, okay, maybe this is quite good. And then now it's like a big focus in what I'm doing. Like I want to sit in the kind of drama comedy space, but like if I hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have known. And I've like, various things have happened in my personal journey since, and I'm developing various projects that are very much within that zone, and I feel so much more excited about the things I'm working on as a result. So I suppose it's also of like, even if you're not sure about a project, you're kind of just giving it a go, might end up on a road that you didn't expect. And meeting Steph and Helen as well, we talk like every day now, and like I didn't know that you guys, you know, so that's great as well.
I think Sophie really undersells how funny she is. Like this is a travesty. I have two things apart from what people have mentioned about like the professionalism on set was just so nice, and people were just so kind of like, you know, really considerate of each other and kind of interested in the project and nice. Like that was great. And I think, you know, like I feel really lucky to have been like plonked in kind of the deep end of like that as like a first like experience of like high production level independent filmmaking. I guess the two things for me were about like with scripts generally, showing things to people before they're ready. I think kind of previously, I mean, you shouldn't show like, you know, the vomited out first draft of things to people, like definitely, you know, apart from kind of trusted people. Yeah, at early stages. But I feel like what has been really great was like working with Sophie and like Helen in the early stages of the development of this. You guys see a project in like 360 degrees of like how to put it together, and that's so much like amazing insight that kind of takes you away from just like the, you know, spending 3 weeks thinking about a comma of like just like the text on the page. So yeah, kind of being it's sort of just like parking your ego a little bit and being like, hello, please look at my thing, I don't have all the answers yet. So yeah, the kind of collaborative element of that was just so great to kind of see kind of travel from the beginning to the end. And then sort of what we were kind of talking about before with creative projects generally, and like carrying on working on things because they might just find their time. My mum told me about like a writer who thinks about her work in a sense of like, it's like they're shopping trolleys, each just sort of like patching around in a supermarket, and you're kind of like putting a couple of things in this trolley and then some stuff in that trolley and then just waiting, and then one suddenly like goes to the checkout. So yeah, this was really great that sort of, you know, suddenly we had the bones of a thing that seemed to fit really nicely with the Uncertain Kingdom brief. So yeah, those are the really positive things.
Yeah, it worked out beautifully, and that shopping trolley metaphor is a gift to everyone. That's a lovely thing to end on. Thank you very much for joining tonight. We've got a new system I'm supposed to plug tomorrow night, which actually really makes me feel like I've got my own talk show. So here we are. This is Mid-Evening with Georgia Goggin. Tonight, we've got Leon Oldstrong doing a Q&A, but he'll be on Twitter. And he'll be talking about his film Borrowed from Our Children at 8 p.m. So hopefully some people can come back and join us then. Thank you very much. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.